G'day there, it's Mark here from Mark's Reviews and Tutorials, and this is another video for my Pools Demystified playlist. I've got a spa here that presented with cracks in the shell, and as you can see here, the customer also got to it with the grinder. He thought he'd dig it out a little bit and right across it, which really enlarged things out a little bit. But some of these cracks were quite long. It's a combination of things. One, the spa shell being in the sun, and just a shrinking and expanding taking place, and also this customer had a tree drop on the shell, which opened up and enlarged all of the cracks as well. So the method I'm going to use and show you is by melting this back together. And to do that, we're going to use a soldering iron or a soldering iron, I believe they call it in the States. Now it's very important that you get this to the right temperature. This spa is made of acrylic, so you can remelt it, as you can see here. And the trick is to melt it enough not to burn the plastic, but just so that it becomes a liquid and you can actually melt it. And the iron wasn't quite hot enough. You can see here, you'll see it was operating a little bit better later on. But it's just a matter of heating the plastic, sticking with it a little bit because you want it to melt for as deep as you can. Now, because of the grinding out that the customer had done, there was only like about a millimetre of plastic left, so I didn't have a lot to work with. Now, the melting is one method. You could also put some acrylic glue in there, but with this guy we decided to melt it back together. This spa also had some burn marks which progressed into cracks as well, and I don't know how these had gotten into the spa. The customer didn't let me know that one, but we did the same thing because it was all dirty and full. It hadn't been ground out, this one, so what I did, I actually remelted the plastic. As you can see, it's bringing it back to the right colour, getting rid of all of those brown marks. And this one, I didn't actually have to fill any hole afterwards. There was no filling or painting or anything like that. I just melted it down to get rid of the big black marks, and melted it further down at the tail end of it to get rid of the crack, to remelt the crack. And then I just scraped it off with a knife, and then hit it up with some sandpaper. Then I also took around a polishing machine and just gave it a polish to cut it up to make the whole thing come back and disappear as much as possible. So there we are, it's working down to the crack. You can see there, it's under the iron a little bit, but doing what we can to remelt the plastic, putting pressure on so the plastic gets pushed back together again. And melts back. You can see there the crack. I'm flicking it with my nail. It's actually a crack in the surface. So doing what we can to melt that back together. Went over it a few times. The slower you can go, the better. You don't want to dig a great big hole. As I said, I wasn't going to patch this, but you do want to, as deep as possible, melt the two plastics back together so that they'll stick to each other. If you've had a spa shell which has been out in the sun and the crack is there because of expansion and contraction, look, the simple fact is that the acrylic cracked under that pressure when it was brand new, so you repair, it'll probably crack again. This won't be enough to hold it, but it'll be enough to, no, it can be enough to hold it. I mean, that's why I did it. This job, I've been back to it, is actually still holding and doing fine, but I wouldn't want to be guaranteeing that it was going to repair. You just got to work as hard as you can to get the plastic to melt all the way through the plastic so it gets as good a adhesion as possible. So that one there, you can see I'm just giving it a rub and a flick with my thumb, and a lot of that plastic edge is coming off. And here, now we're moving over to the bigger cracks, the ones that have been dug out with the grinder. I don't recommend you need to do that because you just end up with a great big hole and very little plastic to work with. You see here the iron is actually hotter, and it's melting the plastic much better now. So it was a matter of leaving the iron a little bit longer, and this is getting good penetration now. This is welding or plastic welding. This is what we wanted to happen. See, there's gaps there, and because of the flow that's in front of the iron, I was able to push some of the plastic into the actual holes and gaps that were there. The next stage after it was all done was just get a snap-off knife and extend the blade out and slide it over the top to take off any loose plastic that you can. And then it was a matter of sanding was the next thing to do. And just sanding again. You're getting the high marks off. All of this was going to be filled. As you can see there, it's just the deeper bits are left. So giving it a sand so that there's no high spots and high marks. Doing that for all of the cracks and all of the different areas. And then with this, we actually just use some waterproof filling compounds. This is very similar to what you'd use on a car. And we just put the filler down and then put spray putty. The pink is the filler that you can see there, and the spray putty is grey that was sprayed down over the top. And then I sanded it back flat. So the finish, what you're looking at there is actually the combination of the what's left. But to touch, to feel, that's all beautifully smooth and nice and flat. And that one's the same. Pulling it back to flat, repairing all that damage so we can put some top coat down and repair the spa. And again, the top coat's very important because it's going to do the main sealing and keeping the water out. And unfortunately, when you've got a speckled finish like it is, you can't get a good color match, but you just get as close as you can. And a lighter color is normally doesn't stand out quite so much as a darker color. Get a lighter color onto it and spray it up and just bring it back as best as you can. But there you go, how to repair a spa. Using this method, as I said, you can use acrylic into the cracks as well, like a two-part polymer glue type thing. But the one I've shown you here is using a soldering iron or a soldering iron, melting it back, and then restoring it back. You get the high spots off first, so you can bring it back to flat, trim it off with a knife, then sand it, and then I put in the body filler, and then sanded that back, and then I put the spray putty over, which is just a thinner, smaller form of the body filler, and then sanded that back to flat, and then finished it off with some top coat. And yeah, it came up really good. Customers were happy, but as I said, I didn't guarantee to them that the crack wasn't going to come out again, because if it's sitting there and getting, you know, super duper hot and baking hot in the sun, then the acrylic and fiberglass shell will continue to flex and quite possibly open up those cracks again.